All right, good afternoon, everybody. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for the opening reception today for our art exhibit, From Darkness to Light. 40 artists respond to the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh. My name is Zoe Burkholder. I am a professor of educational foundations here at Montclair State University, and I'm also director of our Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights Education Project. We are delighted to be hosting our event today, which will include a chance to explore the art exhibit you see here. So this is an art exhibit that is coming to us on loan from Pittsburgh. It will be here for this semester only, and it is available and open to the public, including to teachers and schools. If you're interested in arranging a classroom visit, please let me know. In addition, we have some resources that you can find online. So here, you have access to our online program for today's event. I encourage you to grab that QR code and log in. It's just a Google Doc. And in that Google Doc, you will find links to the online resources associated with this art exhibit today, including an online gallery. And teachers in the room, you can click on individual mosaics and get a very large, high-resolution image of each and every one with a distinct description of what's going on in that piece of art and who the artist was who made it. So it's a really great resource to bring into the classroom. I'd like to start this morning by welcoming the Dean of the College for Education and Engaged Learning, Dr. Vincent Alfonso. Vincent?
Well, it's hard to top Dr. Burkholder, but thank you, Zoe, and I am delighted that you are here. I trust you had a very good morning session for those of you who attended, and it's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to the College for Education and Engaged Learning at Montclair State University. In our college, we practice GHI. It's not group health insurance, as I joke about, because I was born and raised in New York, and that was a very popular insurance country, but it stands for gratitude, hospitality, and invitation. And so I'll start with some gratitude, definitely, and first and foremost to Dr. Burkholder for putting this together, and not only today, but over the years. And we really appreciate all the work that you do in our college, and I'll talk a moment about what our mission is. And then Mr. David Kalla, there he is, David in the back there, who's the project coordinator from Darkness to Light. Thank you so much for being here today and for helping us with this beautiful, beautiful event and display of art. And then, of course, Dr. Natalie Petrozzella, who is a scholar and a phenomenal speaker. And so thank you so much for being here and for being with us today. We really appreciate it. And I know that we were also co-sponsored, I just want to make sure I read it correctly, the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. So those are my words of thanks. Invitation, those of you who throw parties or have events at your place or your family know how important invitation is. And so here in our college, all are welcome and all are invited. And so we're really, really pleased that we're able to have this event this afternoon. And then in terms of hospitality, again, those of you who like to throw parties, you take a lot of pride in inviting people to your home or to your place and being hospitable. And in fact, across the way where some of you were this morning in the business school, there's actually a degree in hospitality. So I believe in hospitality very, very much. It's far more than, you know, serving some food and so on. It's actually bringing people together in community and sharing and breaking bread together and experiencing an event such as today. People always ask me, like, what's the mission of the college? And I'm not trying to be flip or anything sarcastic, but to me, there's only one mission, and that's to educate. And that's what we're about. It's not just education in sort of a narrow sense, but really education in the broadest sense from birth until passing away. I do believe in lifelong learning, the way to go, and I also believe in, you just spoke and met briefly, just about having discourse and being able to talk with each other and to learn from each other. So I don't want to hold up the event. I just wanted to make sure that I was here to welcome you and to thank Zoe and everyone else for today's experience. I am sure you will enjoy the artwork, but also the words that you hear. And I will end with this, that all of you, you're always welcome in the College of Education and Engagement. So all you, Zoe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Alfonso. The College of Education and the Dean's office in particular has just been a tremendous supporter, not only of our workshop here today, but of hosting and installing and doing all of the work that it takes, securing insurance, to bring this exhibit to Montclair State University. And in fact, they're going to be allowing me to bring in Montclair Public Schools Social Studies Department on Monday to work with this exhibit and consider how to use that in the classrooms in Montclair. So we really appreciate the support of the Dean's office here. We happen to be in one of the prettiest rooms on campus. This is the ADP Center for Learning Technologies, and Mr. Joe Babazzano in the back is the director of the ADP Center. It's a fantastic room. Joe was kind enough to work with me to host this art exhibit as well as this event here today. But Joe and I personally showed up at like 8:30 in the morning, met with facilities, worked out how to hang these items on the wall, found the right equipment to do it, and it took a few hours and it took a lot of work to get, as you can imagine, all of the pieces together to make something like this happen, and it's just here for the semester. So Joe, thank you to you and to your entire staff at the ADP Center for supporting this work. It really is so important. And someone in our group earlier was asking me like, oh, I'd love to bring my class here for a field trip to see the art exhibit, and I was like, that would be a terrific idea, and if you have students here, the ADP Center runs programs for students on using learning technology in the classroom, so it's a good chance to do more than one thing. Okay. So I'm really excited for our next speaker. Mr. Dave Kalla is here, and he is the project coordinator for From Darkness to Light for the exhibit that you see here today. He is a member of the Tree of Life Synagogue, which he's been for many, many years, and has served that community and that synagogue in different roles. Dave, why don't you come on up here and tell us a little bit about how you organized this exhibit and what it means to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe. Well, first thing, I learned a lot from the earlier workshop this morning, listening to your questions and so forth. And it's just really, I know kids say it all the time, it's super encouraging to me to know that there's people, educators out there like you guys that really want to keep something, bring something into the classrooms, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you for our kids and the future. I didn't know how formal or informal I should be today. The first part is to really thank you, Dean Alfonso, for wanting to see this exhibit and the workshop today and in the university. And then to Joe Babazzano, I'm told you were very instrumental. Thank goodness you know how to use a hammer and level, and it looks wonderful. Thank you very much. And then also the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. I met her this morning, and thank you very much for believing in doing the right things. And then, of course, Zoe. Time flies. It seems we probably started work on this 6 months ago, if not longer. But it's very nice to meet you in person. And once again, for all your efforts of organizing and coordinating today's events. And also the staff at Montclair State University that probably is not here, but we appreciate them. So, almost 7 years ago, our community suffered the largest anti-Semitic attack in the United States. I'll try to keep this short in some areas, but at that time, the community of Squirrel Hill, we were really it did not take long to see the overwhelming warning from others all around, not just the country, but the world. Just to know how, you never know how your neighbors are going to react in times of despair. Our local Muslim community, within a week, raised $250,000 for the congregation. It boggles my mind, why does it have to take a disaster to bring communities together? Moving on to the exhibit here, we received many gifts from all over the world. And this one, I had the ability to actually see this in person in Austin, Texas. I was flying through Texas, and people would reach out to our congregation and say, oh, we have this beautiful gift, and we have a memorial ceremony, and if someone can come by and see us, that would be great. Well, that happened to be me, and so the story goes, first saw this, well, lead artist Susan Ripnick collaborated with 40 mosaic artists to have a memorial mosaic project. She's a working force just like many of you. Susan just felt the need to do something, and the way she communicates as an artist is through art. So she reached out to, at the time it was 18 and 36 and 40 other artists, and they all wanted to be part of this program. And when I saw it, it was very meaningful to me to know that there's 40 people, 40 artist people that maybe some are Jewish, some aren't Jewish, but that day hit home to a lot of people. And so this is, and I encourage you to scan the QR code, and you'll see a booklet that describes everything. So the way this sort of fell into my hands, although it was a gift to our congregation, I went to, at the time I was treasurer of Tree of Life, I went to our president and executive director and said, this is too important to bring it back to our, we really didn't have a place at that point because it was shot up. But it would just sit in the basement somewhere until whatever. And I said, I think I can do something with it. They said, fine, just stay out of trouble, basically. And so that's what happened. And it's been on, I think, 18 different, we've had 18 different venues, from galleries to some museums to, this is where I personally feel it's most beneficial, is the educational area, the universities, and take it back to your schools also. So working with lead artist Susan Ripnick, the Mosaic Collection not only commemorates the victims and survivors of 10/27, 2018, but also reaches out to the community to initiate conversation and educate on hate and anti-Semitism. The mosaics express themes of hope, resilience, and social justice in the face of tragedy. So you'll see, not only are they beautiful and inspiring, but when you look at the words that the artists use to express why they decided to be part of this project and what their artwork means to them, I think you'll find that will be truly inspiring to you too. And just a few of the titles that you'll see over there: Hailing Love, Be the Change, Coming Together in Peace, Connected Hearts, Speak Out and Let Your Voice Be Heard, which I think was the last thing we heard upstairs. And you can pretty much, there's two in particular that I think are kind of unique. The far right one, it's actually paper. It's not a mosaic, but it's a special type of art. And you can see there's a center, and it's dark, and then there's a green sprout coming out. Even in darkness, life will grow. And then there's another one, happens to be a Pittsburgh artist. Start from the left, 3 down, it's the pattern. And there's 4 different patterns. And you'll read his description. In my mind, we're all different, but we still meet in the same place. So art is a great form of expression. Art teaches, art transcends, art elevates, and art inspires. And these are words from Abby Schwartz, who is the director of the Skirball Museum in Cincinnati, who was the one who allowed us to have the very first opening. And she really, we keep learning from each venue, but when she got the original set of mosaics, she said, Dave, we're moving forward with this. Two things. First, let me show you how to package them properly. So they now have a really nice crate, not 10 different FedEx boxes. And then she also said, we'll realize this will turn into a full-time job, which it has. And the word spreads, which is really, that's the best form of salesmanship. And from darkness to light, we believe in the transformative potential of art to inspire empathy, understanding, and social change. So our mission is to confront and combat anti-Semitism and hate through the power of art and remembrance. Through a collection of thought-provoking artworks and personal narratives, we aim to illuminate the devastating impact of anti-Semitism while fostering a space for reflection and dialogue. This exhibit serves as a solemn reminder of consequences of hatred and discrimination, urging visitors to stand against anti-Semitism and hate in all its forms. By engaging with the stories of those affected and exploring the roots of prejudice, we strive to contribute to a world where unity and acceptance prevail over all divisiveness. So the question, where are we now and how do we move forward? Hopefully the mosaics will help you with these questions. I hope after you have viewed the mosaics, you will be inspired to have conversation with your family, friends, and neighbors. The Kuna alum, let's all make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. If I stand up here, the screen goes off. It's like a magic trick. I see, it just wants a little something, something. Okay. Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing your experience and telling us a little bit about the collection of mosaics. It really is a remarkable collection of work. It is my pleasure now to introduce a very good friend of mine. This is Dr. Natalia Melman-Petrzela, who is a professor of history at the New School. And Natalia has a really long bio, which you'll find linked in our program here. And I asked her right before, I said, would you like me to read this whole thing? She said, no, just make me sound really smart. So that is not hard to do. Natalia, Dr. Petrzela, has a PhD from Stanford in history. She has a number of amazing publications and books to her name. Most recently, her publication is a book called Fit Nation, After the Colon,
The Gains and Pains of America's Exercise Obsession.
The Gains and Pains of America's Exercise Obsession. A completely fascinating scholarly look at the history of exercise and exercise kind of programs and fitness in the US and how it fits into our political culture today. She's working on new research that looks at historical perspective on culture wars, especially inside of public schools. She's also quite a popular podcaster, and she has links to some of her podcasts in her bio, which include Welcome to Our Fantasy, which is a really fascinating one about Chippendales in California. Yeah, so it's history with a twist. She's on the History Channel a lot. If you're a History Channel buff, you will see her on there regularly. In fact, she was just in LA filming 2 days ago for the History Channel. So we are very pleased to have Natalia with us today. She'll be talking about her recent work working with the New York City Board of Education on a new curriculum studying Jewish American history and presenting that work to teachers in K-12 schools. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Petrzela.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, and this is just such an incredible event to be part of. I mean, I always love being with teachers who are doing the work in the classroom, but also, you know, to see such a beautiful exhibit come out of such an ugly event. And it's great to be here with all of you, so thank you for that. Okay, so I should say this is hot off the presses, the Jewish American Hidden Voices curriculum. I've been on a few panels talking about this. This is the first time I kind of do a standalone discussion of it, so bear with me, and I am purposely informal, but I'm excited to get to talk about this as well. So I don't want to just talk me for too long. So, okay, it's gonna work. So I should say that I'm a historian of the United States, and in this capacity, I am the lead scholar on the New York City Department of Education's Jewish American Hidden Voices project. Now, this was initiated and paid for by the New York City DOE, but it is freely available on the internet for everyone. Actually, the teachers that I've been meeting with so far have all been in California for some reason. So I'm hoping that actually New York City schools use this, and I'm doing some PD with them next month, but it really is available for everyone, and I should say it's available for everyone who teaches any kind of social studies or history. In this case, it would really be US, but it's not a standalone course. So let me tell you a little bit about, can I see a show of hands? Has anyone heard of Hidden Voices before? Okay, Edith has, okay, great. A few of you. So this is what it is, and everyone can hear me well, right? Okay, never been told I'm not too loud. Okay, so Hidden Voices started in 2018, and it's an initiative of the New York City Department of Education that is what it sounds like, but also not what it sounds like. So in my mind, it kind of sounds, well, I'll just tell you what it is, not my misimpressions of it. Essentially what it is that there are different, I call them curricular supplements, because they're not standalone curricula, focused first and foremost by groups that have been hidden or excluded from sort of dominant narratives in history. So you can see these are the ones that exist now. I don't know if you can read that, but Hidden Voices, LGBTQ+ voices, Asian American and Pacific Islanders, Stories of the Golden Diaspora, 2 volumes. Americans with Disabilities, I can't read that far. This is the Jewish one. Oh, Latinos. And then alongside the Jewish American one, which is the one that I've worked on, one on Muslim Americans is coming out at the same time as well. And the idea is they're from these groups, but also the people who we focus on, because it's essentially a series of profiles, are not necessarily like the most famous Jews in America. So you will see, for example, in the Jewish American Hidden Voices one, volume 2, which comes out shortly, yes, like Louis Brandeis is in there, right? A very, very famous name. But you also have someone like Nancy Lieberman, who was this basketball star, who has an amazing lens on different aspects of both Jewish American women's history. So we tried to do a combination, and I think all the Hidden Voices are like this, though I only speak for the one I worked on, of focusing on focusing on groups that are often excluded, but also on people within those groups who aren't necessarily the kind of best of or most famous or who's who. The other thing that's important about these people is that, and it's really fun to make the list of who to include, but it's also really hard because you're excluding by virtue of inclusion. So nothing in here is exhaustive, trust me. But we also wanted to pick people who were a lens on bigger phenomena in US history and or like, I hate to say the Jewish experience, but Jewish experiences. So people who were not just fascinating in their own right, but who also kind of showcased a range of broader dynamics that a teacher would be focusing on anyway. And sometimes the people, the stories that we choose kind of deepen those narratives, and it's like, oh, also, here's this person. Other times they challenge them, or they introduce a whole different facet that maybe the K through 12 curriculum is not focusing on. The other thing, which was very challenging, and I'm sure you do versions of this thinking all the time when you focus on individuals, is because this is not a standalone curriculum, we can't count on the fact that any particular teacher will use everybody. So you gotta think that, if we're lucky, they use one of these. A student might encounter one profile in here, hopefully more, over the course of their years. So it's very important both to do what historians should always be doing, which is not engage in like hero worship, right? No one is a perfect person. But you also don't want to have like the bad guys here. If part of the point of this is to push back on negative stereotypes. So the example that I always use is we did not include, for example, Judah Benjamin, who was very high up in the Confederacy. Because if you were encountering one Jewish American history profile, do you really want the guy who was defending the Confederacy? That to me does more damage than good. I think we should learn about him. He's a fascinating figure, but it didn't seem right for this. So what you will see if you read these profiles is a kind of real, like, this is not hero worship, but people who made positive contributions, but hopefully are presented in a complex way. And the other thing that I'll say is that the people who contribute to Hidden Voices, so I hate, the term lead scholar sounds like way too magisterial for this, but so I was the lead scholar, so I did a lot of the kind of like overarching writing about like, they're called portraits of an era, broad stretches of like the periods in US history. I brought together scholars and writers to do this, but basically the people who were writing these profiles are experts in the person they're writing about, experts in Jewish studies, and those are both from the scholarly realm, like professors like me, but also we have museum educators in there, basically people who, it was just it was a deal breaker. You had to be somebody who could write for a broader audience because teachers are busy. They don't want to like go through, you might be the leading expert on whoever. If you write in impenetrable scholarly prose, your teachers have other things to do than to deal with them. So, okay, so that's kind of the Hidden Voices project overall. Now, you might ask, but why only come up with Jewish American hidden voices today? And we started working on this in 2023. Well, I think some of the tributaries are probably pretty obvious, but I'll say that there's been rising anti-Semitism documented in school and outside since 2016. Basically, those stats are replicated by many groups. After October 7th, there was a big spike, and I think you know this if you're here in this room. So that kind of prompted a sense that we really needed to focus on have a Jewish volume on this, or 2 volumes. Then in New York City, I know I'm outside of the city here, but there was an attack at Hillcrest High School, which was really widely publicized. A wonderful teacher who I've actually spoken with on panels about this named Karen Martyr. Some students found a picture of her on social media at a rally to support bringing the hostages home. And they essentially, it was very scary, cornered her in her room. It was essentially like a riot. Really horrifying stuff. And now the latter part of the story, which rarely gets told, is that I admire her so much. I don't know if I could have done the same thing. Rather than leave the school where she had been so dangerously victimized, she thought, and I'm paraphrasing her, I'm a teacher. I've never been more needed than right now. We gotta have conversations about this. I need to figure out why this was so incendiary and why my students are so ignorant that standing up for bringing the hostages home would incite essentially a riot. And so she's been really involved, not on my project, but in kind of trying to encourage that discourse. Now that happened, like you probably saw it in the New York Post, Fox News, people went crazy about this. So if you might remember those anti-Semitism congressional hearings, Chancellor Banks, then Chancellor Banks of New York City, basically was put on the hot seat to do something about anti-Semitism in schools. Guess how we got funded to do this, right? We are part of the solution. And I would not even say we're even close to like the solution, but we're part of it. Okay, so it was very clear that the current models for teaching about Jews in many schools were insufficient. This is kind of once they started bringing me in and I was thinking about should I get involved or not. One, Holocaust education is mandated in many states. I think it's 38 right now. How that actually happens in the classroom is unclear, but it is focused on the Holocaust. Very important thing to learn about, but one experience in the history of Jews, and not in the United States, although obviously very relevant. And then 2, there's another point where often there's an incident that happens and then there's some kind of anti-Semitism training that takes place. I think both of these things are enormously important, but they don't even come close to helping to teach who Jews are, what Jewish identity and experiences are like. Then this is a bit of like a personal piece of this too. I was approached by the DOE in late 2023 to get involved with this. This was a moment when I, as an educator, as a Jew, as a mother, as a citizen, felt like what I could only describe as playing anti-Semitism whack-a-mole. Like I felt like I was just like in react mode, like write that email, send that tweet, do this, like comfort my child. Like it just felt like I was in constant reaction mode of this thing that was happening all around me. And then there also wasn't a lot of productive conversation taking place. And then I also saw with my college students, who were the ones I was in most sustained contact with, besides my own children, yes, I was seeing anti-Semitic things happening in the classroom and on our campus, but I also just saw so much ignorance. Like most of these people were not hardened anti-Semites. No way. They just like didn't know a lot of things, right? And so I'm still idealistic enough, and I think anyone who spends their time in classrooms probably is too, to believe like education can actually be part of the solution here, right? So this to me, when they approached me, even though like my main field of study is not Jewish history, but I thought, okay, if I make that very clear, which they knew obviously, and my role again is doing this sort of overarching US history stuff, and I've done so much work with curriculum, this is something I want to be involved with. So what does this do? It integrates and amplifies Jewish stories and experiences into US history. And I think very important today, the other time that a lot of students are encountering any conversation about Jews is just through the lens of the, I guess maybe over a war right now, but the conflict in Gaza and in Israel right now. And what was so wild about that too, was that everybody's talking about this, but like nobody knows anything, right? I've never seen more deeply held opinions about with less like substantiating knowledge. Now something interesting that came in there is, you know, like I have some fancy degrees, but I am not an expert on the Middle East. I'm not an expert on Israel. I'm not an expert on the war. I'm not an expert on genocide, any of these things. And so I did have a kind of pause of like, well, what's the appropriate way for me to make an intervention here? Because there are a lot of people who just want talking points and whoever will listen to them. And so to me, this curriculum, because it's so rooted in US history, I'm like, all right, I know a thing or two about that. I know a thing or two about controversial curricula. Like, I'm in. So it's actually been way more work than I ever thought, but I think it's worth it. I think if people use it, it's worth it. Okay, and then the other kind of big picture thing that I just want to point to before we get into looking at some of this curriculum together is like, why didn't this happen earlier? And I think there's actually more to it, and this is my historian of curriculum hat on. There's more to it than just, well, October 7th happened. Here, and Zoe, you studied this stuff too, so you may disagree with me or not. So one, in New York City, which is like the biggest Jewish metropolis in the world outside of Israel, there just wasn't a sense that anti-Semitism is a real problem. Like seriously, in New York, everyone eats bagels. I've literally heard people say this. And even though hate crimes against Jews remain, you know, the group most targeted, there was a sense that like, this isn't our problem in New York City. So that attitude was very prevalent. Two, this is one of these things where if you start really listening to discourse around these issues, you're like, oh, I start to understand the like peculiarities of language. A lot, there's no question that since the 1970s, certainly since the 1990s, and then 2020 in a different way, there's been a lot of attention in a good way to kind of identity-based education, right? Looking through the lens of different identities. A lot of that work has been done through the lens of underrepresented, I don't say it like it's fake, but it's real, it's a quote, underrepresented minorities, right? Jews, definitely the victim of anti-Semitism, but cannot really be called an underrepresented minority in the same way. So I think that that is another reason that this hasn't been a focus in curricular contexts. Anti-racist education, this is a word that gained a lot of currency after 2020 and George Floyd's murder, tended to be organized by its more simplistic promoters around a black-white binary, right? And in a kind of like us-them perspective. That's complicated for Jews because in that framework, Jews are often defined to be, as some parent told me the other day, just another flavor of white person, which I think is an interesting way to define it, but a historically inaccurate one. Lots of Jews present as white, lots of Jews self-define as white. Not all Jews are white by any stretch of the imagination, and this is also a very historically illiterate way of thinking about Jews. I mean, let me go back to that. So the kind of like quick and dirty analysis of this is that really until World War II in the United States, Jews were considered completely other race. The Semitic race, they were not considered white by any stretch of the imagination. Not usually or really ever legally excluded in the same way, say, as black people, Chicanos in the West, but not defined as white. After World War II, when it was very clear what the outcome of scientific racism against Jews was in Nazi Germany, the kind of intellectual climate changes in the United States. You also have many generations of Jewish immigrants that have been here and have been more assimilated. Many Ashkenazi Jews can be white passing, although there are always Jews who cannot be white passing, Ashkenazi or otherwise. And so what historians of whiteness would say is that after World War II, Jews, again, generalizing, tended to be sort of absorbed into a whiteness framework, and that black-white binary of black people here, white people here, Jews within whiteness was solidified. And I think that that is sort of the thinking that governed a lot of the kind of anti-racist education curriculum. Okay. This is like a version of that too, but I think also like you heard people in the last 5 years talk a lot about like organizing the world around oppressor and oppressed, which is another, I think, in this case, unhelpful binary. And that, when it was applied particularly to Israel-Palestine, orients, and I'm sure you heard this before, Israel as only a Jewish oppressor white state, and Palestine's, the struggle of Palestinians as like clearly and like incontrovertibly linked with the struggle of people of color in the United States. There's an intellectual argument to be made about the veracity of those connections, but I think it's really, really, if you're a historian, that is so incomplete in understanding Jewish history in the United States. And the last thing I'll say is that in the United States, there are a lot of studies, sort of activism around this, and there are a lot of Jewish parents and the kind of people who usually raise a fuss about what's being taught in schools who are like, well, this isn't really a priority because we have this kind of robust Jewish education system, whether that's Hebrew school, whether those are Jewish day schools. And so I would say that those, just stepping back, are some important contextual factors of why this has not been, teaching Jewish American history as US history has not been such a focus. Okay, so I just want to get into just showing you, because you actually hopefully will use this in your classroom, how these work. And so maybe we'll look at, like, what do you think, one profile together, and then we can like open it up for questions. I don't want to.
One or two.
Yeah, one or two. Okay, great.
Yeah, we're good.
Great. So how these work, so basically what they are is they're a series of profiles. Volume 1 goes up until the end of the 19th century. Volume 2 will go up until the present day. And then each profile, and I can show you this so you have profiles that are like 1,200 words. They're written, they're supposed to be better than a Wikipedia entry, but not as boring as a scholarly article. So, and you can be sure it's not ChatGPT level, because they're actual experts writing this stuff. So you have profiles. Each profile is linked with primary sources, both visual and some textual, that either are, I mean, sometimes it's a photo of the person and there's just that. Sometimes it's something like an article about the person, or it's their patent, and all of those primary sources are chosen, again, to be able to make links to the broader era. Then there are questions, and the questions that we have there are ones that are, this is EMH, so like early grade, elementary, middle, and high school, so that you can hopefully easily just think, oh, what would be appropriate for my kids? And those are focus questions about the profile itself, thinking about broader themes in American history, and then document analysis for the primary sources, and then enduring questions. And some of these, like, we had some real editorial debates where I'm like, seriously, they're like, why would someone want to leave home? Like, they're just like so vague, and they're like, no, that's like what you ask a second grader. Like, I've taught second grade for a long time. I'm like, okay, fine. We should all think, why would someone want to leave home? And then there are notes, and I think that these are really helpful too, because like these are meant to be small enough that it's not overwhelming, but if you find, oh, I'd like to go deeper into, say, what I'm about to show you, Levi Strauss, the man who created Levi's jeans, who was like a huge part of the kind of like Western expansion story, then you'll have like notes to go further with them. Okay, and then framing these, if you're wondering, well, how does this really fit into the antebellum period? I have written handy Portraits of an Era essays where you can read them and you can see how this fits into the antebellum United States. And also, and you'll notice that I'm tacking back between sort of Jewish history and just broader US history. What I've tried to do in those pieces is give you, like, but like remind you of what's going on in the US writ large, but then also like what's happening in the Jewish community in this period. And there's really interesting stuff that I think is not common knowledge if you're not a specialist. Okay, so there's that. So let me actually go out. I want to show you some of these profiles. So wait, I just exited out. So you're telling me, is this in Safari, the other one?
Chrome.
Sorry, oh, Chrome? Okay, good. Yeah, who uses Safari anymore? Okay, awesome. Sorry, who knows this is broadcast.
The DOE uses Safari.
What'd you say?
The DOE actually uses Safari a lot.
So, okay, so here you can literally just Google Hidden Voices, Jewish American history. You can just Hidden Voices, Jewish American Hidden Voices. And by the way, I was just saying, like, well, I shouldn't say this on Zoom, but they're not printed yet for very boring bureaucratic reasons, but you can pull any of this off the internet. It's fully available. And soon you should be able to order a printed copy if you want. Okay, so I actually wrote these page numbers here, so let me just get it. So this is 292 pages. You may not want a printed copy, it's so big. I just want to make sure that I can get you to the right page quickly. So let's look at Levi Strauss, because I mentioned him, page 113. Sorry, so well, you can see the way this is organized too. Yeah, you can see here, table of contents. So you can see like here, it was so hard to get rid of people, but like you have both people whose identity was very much being a Jew in America. They're a leader of Jewish life in one form or another, as a rabbi, as an activist for the Jewish community. But you have other people who also that wasn't the way that they defined themselves. And we very deliberately tried to do that, tried to pick a range of people who had different relationships to their Judaism. So yeah, I mean, just to pick out a few, Edward Selig Solomon, major figure in the Civil War, who was really important in kind of shifting Lincoln's attitude towards Jews as really important members of the Union War effort. Labor leader like Samuel Gompers, Emma Lazarus, the poet and activist, Joseph Pulitzer. Some of these names need no introduction. And one thing that we tried to do here, that we tried to do in general, which is kind of attention. So this is made by the New York City schools with the ambition of it being a national curriculum. Jews have a majorly important history in New York City, but we also, there's also a little bit of a, I wouldn't quite call it anti-Semitic, but a sort of stereotype of like the New York Jew. Like, I mean, Jews are just like a New York phenomenon. And so one of the things that we really tried to do is, of course, really highlight this rich history in New York City, but then also focus on people who had lives all over the country. The South, I mean, a major place, really the first place for American Jewry, the West, the Midwest, so you'll find people from all over. Okay, now of course I forgot what page I was going to. Let's see, Levi Strauss is page 113, but that's definitely not going to be 113 in the PDF. Okay, bear with me. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff at the beginning, language usage, all of that. Yeah, you can do gender history. Sorry, this is like real time, how you be using this, right? I will say that there's a version floating around out there where someone plugged this into this very cool, not AI summarizer, but it's something to make PDFs look and read like a book. And then I was sharing that everywhere, and the DOE people were like, no, if you do that, we don't know how many clicks that we have, so don't use that. So it's actually easier to use than this, but we stopped doing that. Okay, you can see this, right? Yes. Okay, so, well, you can just, this is like verite up here, so you can see what it would really look like. Okay, so Levi Strauss, the inventor of an American icon. Okay, so here's an inventor from the antebellum period. Ina Rabinovich Fox is a historian, is actually Israeli Jewish herself, but is also, she would define herself, I think, as a historian of fashion rather than a historian of Jews. But so she was really excited to be part of this. She's a really good writer. You can see these big kind of focus questions. How do people, laws, and new technology shape a nation? That's something that can cross historical eras. How did industrialization change how people lived and worked? How can we understand history through the lens of fashion? As you heard from some of the things I work on, I love taking sort of like everyday life things, whether it's fashion or fitness or Chippendales, and using those as a lens to understand how people live. Actually, we have in volume 2 is Dr. Ruth talking about the Chippendales. And that one, they're like, do you really think this is okay for like, I'm like, maybe like the K through 6 people won't use her, but she was a major, she really spoke out a lot also standing up for gay rights when it was very unpopular because she saw that persecution is related to anti-Semitism. Okay, so then you have your profile. There are pull quotes here, like, look, this is a pull quote from a primary source, 1873. Simple as this device seems. The device is a pair of jeans. Like, imagine when the jeans were new technology. And so that's, I think, an interesting thing to look at. Strauss's story was one of seeing the opportunity that the gold rush presented and going out there, in many ways taking this quintessentially Jewish trade, the Shmata trade, right? And going out to the frontier and setting up shop in a really new, in a new place. Okay. Yeah, he established a synagogue. Okay, so then you might have, these are all illustrated, talks about like his role as a German Jewish immigrant in this period. I'm not going to obviously read this out loud to you, but you can see that you have footnotes throughout. The footnotes are all hyperlinked. And most of not every contributor is Jewish, but the overwhelming number is Jewish. I tend to be hesitant about litmus tests of any sort, but on this, it did seem to be, on all these things, like you want this to be a way for the community to also write about the community too. So, but it's a very diverse group of people writing, I can tell you that, but lots of political diversity too. Okay, so you see these are illustrated, citations, this is what they look like. They're actually pretty short. None of them are over like 1,500 pages, but 1,500 words. But yeah, we got a 3-year course on Levi Strauss. Okay, so then, this is meant to correspond to the Passport to Social Studies, which New York City uses, but I don't think, come on, you don't need to use that to be talking about like early inventions in America. You know what these connections are, and for different grade levels, so you should be able to slot them in pretty easily. These thinking about questions, so these are much more specific, right? And you can take these or leave it. Like, you might not be that interested in why did denim and duck cloth appeal to Californians in the 1850s and 60s. That's pretty specific. But I think for maybe even middle, but high school kids, you could just assign the profile. Like, for younger kids, that was like for younger kids, the teacher would probably read it themselves and then create some content. But for older kids, they could definitely read those profiles, and we wrote about them that way. So yeah, how did denim become associated with an outsider, outlaw image? Yeah, so this is one where the stories really are not about his Judaism. Very different from a profile like of Isaac Neser or Asser Levy, whose life was about establishing really Jewish community in the United States. This is one that is much more connected to these other themes. Okay, so additional resources, there you go. And I just want to show you some of the, primary sources. So look, here's a patent. This was the first patent for jeans. You can see the fastening pocket openings, 1873, which really allowed him to make his fortune. Let's see the other kinds of stuff that we have. We take them out of the historical era. Here's a promotional flyer. This stuff, I personally love using this kind of imagery like with students. I think it's actually, I find using sources like this a really great way to address the challenge I feel like I'm always addressing, which is like how do you get the kids who did absolutely no reading or preparation on board, but also not dumb it down too much for the kids who really are prepared. I think showing an image like this is a really great way to do that, because a kid who's been like semi-awake will be able to react to this, whereas somebody who's been reading, always the standard, right? The semi-awake child, the simple son. But I think also that, but somebody who really has been paying attention and reading will have a much more refined kind of reaction to something like that and what it means about the American West. All right, let's see. So you have different images, the patents. Yeah, more questions, and then we take them even out of that era. So you could use this and jump into like a gender history piece and look at like, oh, the first ladies' jeans that they released, which by the way, isn't until almost a century after the first ones. Why? And there are a whole bunch of reasons you could talk about with that, which I won't go into here. So, do you want to talk a little bit about like one more person, or we could just open it up, or it's up to you.
Tell us about one more.
Okay, I'll tell you about one more. So I'm not at that level of detail, but like here's someone else. So like I said, Levi Strauss's main legacy, I would say, is not necessarily so intimately connected to his Jewishness. Someone like Edward Selig Solomon absolutely is. So he was a celebrated soldier in the Union in the Civil War, and as I mentioned, he was really integral to Lincoln, kind of changing his perspectives on Jews and to fighting against anti-Semitism. There was an anti-Semitic order which banished Jews from the division of the government that was called Order 11, and the idea, they were worried about profiteering happening during the war, but the way that it was framed, it was like the profiteering isn't the problem, like the Jews are the problem, and Lincoln actually pushed back against that in large part because of him. So, again, I said I would just do this one quickly, but this one I think gets much, much more deeply into the particular kind of anti-Semitism that existed at that point, and also the way that specific Jews were resisting it through participating in the most important event, obviously, of this era, which was the Civil War. And then, of course, I mean, depending what kind of connections you want to draw, we see analogs to this in every war in U.S. history, right? Where you both see that like closing ranks that fuels anti-Semitism, but then you also see, you know, different kinds of military heroic contributing to the erosion of anti-Semitism. And I would say that relates to all kinds of racism and stereotyping for different groups as well. Okay, yeah. So photographers from the early Civil War photography here. So you can easily put that into a lesson about the Civil War. Maps. We use the one thing we don't have, which I think is kind of a bummer, is like audio and visual sources. But you can find that on your own. I think that stuff is like fairly easy to find. I would have loved to be able to do it, but because this is really a print thing, they don't have that. I don't even want to say it out loud because it's going to force me to do it, but I was like, oh, when this releases, I could like post my own supplementary ones on Instagram, and then people could come there and they could, but don't hold me to that because that's a lot of work. But I think somebody should do that. I think that's great. Okay, so those are just a couple that I wanted to show you. And then I just want to conclude with one, before we chat, with one thing that I think is really important. I'm going to do something totally tendentious and read something I wrote, but rather than just tell you, because it's hard. I think it's better for me to articulate it this way. But to the question of like, who is Jewish American Hidden Voices for? It's a little bit like obtuse, but Jewish American Hidden Voices is not just for Jews. So let me conclude by saying this. So who should learn about Jewish American history? Certainly this curriculum will be useful in teaching Jewish school children and teachers about their own past. It's important and empowering for members of any identity group to see themselves represented in school. The notion, however, that identity-based curriculum is only or even primarily for the group that is its focus is understandable but outdated and parochial. Rather, this guide embraces the universalist assumption that learning about the experiences of Jews is a benefit to people of all backgrounds. So thank you for letting me read that. I'm still paying attention. But the reason that I say that is because, when you look at sort of the origins, and still today, of a lot of the curricula that are based around identity, the idea is a good idea, which is like, you can't be what you can't see, I need to see myself, I'm invisible. And that's true, and like I stand by that. But it's also very parochial to think that like, Black studies is for Black kids and Jewish history is for Jewish kids. Like, no. And I think Jewish American history really forces us to think about the universalist potential of this stuff, in part because Jews are such a tiny minority. So if you really think these identity-based curricula are only for those kids, this would never get off the ground, because it would be like, oh, that small group of people, this is just for them, it's not worth it. And so I think it's very important to hold those two things at once. Representation is crucial to any group, but also, like, we're so much better than that. It's 2025. We should all be learning about all of each other in service of a kind of more pluralistic and universalistic understanding of history and our future. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, and tell me who you are too.
It depends on the day.
Okay.
Right now, Danae Davis, I'm faculty in the Department of Teaching and Learning, elementary ed. Thank you so much for sharing. This is a curriculum for, thinking about young people. How are they represented or present in the book?
Young people?
Yeah. they want-
Yeah, so it's interesting. We talk a fair amount about the childhood of these individuals. And I would say there's no one who we only talk about as a child,
Okay.
but we try to talk about them as kids as well, for the obvious reason that you want to know how they grew up. It's when you're talking to young kids, it's as relatable. So I think you'll find that the profile essays bring that dimension in. So, but like, very important question, especially for the elementary grades.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Sure.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment.
Sure.
So I really like these programs, not just the Jewish one, but all the ones you had listed in the earlier one. Because I think what a lot of misconception out there is that, when it comes to certain groups, like why are teachers teaching about these groups? Why are they not just focusing on reading, writing? We see it all the time.
Like, it's just extra. Yeah.
Right, but what people don't understand is any curriculum that's written or mandated, like Jewish, like the LGBTQ, right? It's not about teaching about that. It's about teaching about people who made contributions, who happen to be gay, who happen to be Jewish. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So that their representation is there for that gay kid in the classroom, or the black, or this, whatever the minority group is. So you can teach a lesson on westward expansion or inventions and bring this person and be like, and he was Jewish. Well, you're not teaching about Jewish. You're exposing the students that this was a Jewish contribution to society. This was an LGBTQ person contribution to society.
Yeah, no, I think that you bring up something that I often say, like when I chat about this, that I haven't, which is like, there are actually like quite a few Jewish luminary figures that like people learn about but don't necessarily learn that they're Jewish. And I think that, or any other group, right? But I think that that's really important. And then I think, what I would say is I totally agree with what you're saying. It's about, it is like an inaccurate teaching of US history to erase the identity groups of the people, to make it look like this is like just this like white Protestant nation and everything else is distraction. It's just not correct, you know what I mean? And so I think the like opposition to focusing too much on identity is like, well, this is like divisive and this is anti-American and this is separating us. Trust me, there are people who teach in that way, like, how should I say this?
Yeah.
Okay, let me say this in a way that I think is intellectually honest, but also like maybe a little controversial, I don't know. So as I've been trying to get the word out about this, I've gotten pushback from like both sides of the political spectrum. The pushback from the right, which it tends to be like, this is like rooted in DEI ideology, and so like this is not worth it. And the thing that I have said to those people, and I don't feel like I'm like, covering or doing anything sleight of hand, I think it's very honest, it's like, look, I'll just say, I think programs, like if you're familiar with like California's Liberated Ethnic Studies program, like to me that program, which overtly says it has a political agenda, this is like much more focused on the kind of like inherent racism of American society. I think those programs, that program in particular, has given a bad name to programs like this.
I understand.
And so what I'm saying is that like, I think it's inaccurate not to focus on the identities of people, and it just like impoverishes our study of US history, and it is absolutely delusional to think that just teaching about the contributions and the challenges and the struggles and the amazing triumphs of different groups is somehow detracting from the beauty of what America is, right? To me, I feel like more patriotic when I understand our complicated past and everything that has gone into it. And I think it's so wrong, honestly, to act like this true accounting of history will distract or diminish that patriotism. Only there are, like I said, some, I think curricula will do that, but I don't think this is part of that at all. Yeah. Thank you. It was kind of a question, but very evocative comments. Yeah.
Hi, I was looking at all the books, and
Yeah.
I may have missed it, but I didn't see anything on Native Americans. Is there any plan for that?
That's a great question. I don't want to be like, that's not my department. I would be, but it's not. I would, you know, the DOE is so huge. I'm actually would be shocked if they don't either have one in the works or haven't done one. It's possible that while I was pressing the designer assistant on PowerPoint, that like that one got pushed off to the side or something like that. Is it not? Did you look online?
No, I was on the website, I didn't see anything.
So there actually may not be, it might be, it's funny because studying the Lenape is such an important part of the New York City curriculum.
Here.
And yeah, all over, right, I'm sure. I mean, my daughter, she switched schools in COVID and she's like, I like have learned about the Lenape every year. Like she knows more about it. She's like, I've never heard the Civil War, but, so it's not that it's not a focus, but I don't know if there's a Hidden Voices one. I don't know. Do you know it, do you? Oh, yeah.
I feel like there might be, but I don't know
Yeah.
if I've seen it personally.
Yeah.
My question, I'm not sure how this is gonna land, but, and I'm not the best
You've
at
known me a
crafting
long
questions.
time.
I don't know if it's part question, part comment, but
Yeah.
here we go. Thinking about this morning's, workshops around, Holocaust education, as a Jew and as an educator, I often hear and feel like, oh, Jews are always playing the victim, you're always a victim, that kind of stereotype, because you're always teaching about the Holocaust, for example. How do you think that the work that you put together, where you're raising mostly positive sort of history messages and stories, how do you think that could maybe combat this idea of victimizing or?
So I don't even want what I'm going to say to sound like I'm giving credence to the people who say like, oh, the Jews are always talking about the Holocaust. I think that's a really insensitive and pretty disgusting comment, and I've heard it like in rooms like this even, like the rolling of the eyes. Like, I think that's just awful.
Because for me, sorry to cut you off, for me,
Yeah.
part of my hesitation, I have looked through the curriculum,
Yeah.
and I plan to use it this year, but I do, if I'm being honest, have a hesitation in using it, because I'm like, I don't want my students or even my coworkers to feel like, is she just inserting this?
I mean, to be
Yeah.
in New York City and to be told that like talking about Jews in the course of US history is some like frivolous or self-indulgent diversion is so intellectually like vacant that I'm not saying it won't happen, I've seen worse happening, but I'll come and fight for you. If you're not that you need me, like if you get that feedback. But I do think, I mean, it is, like I said at the beginning, like I don't think Holocaust education should be the only or the primary way that kids are learning about the history of Jews. And not just because it sparks this kind of cruel, oh, they're always making themselves victims. Like, not only because of that, but I think just it's like not the whole of the Jewish experience. So yeah, I didn't write this for the haters, but I do think that telling these stories of a multiplicity of Jewish experiences, which don't shy away from anti-Semitism, but are certainly not only about anti-Semitism at all. I think that would do something to kind of push back on that. Like when you're learning about these successful people and enterprising people, and and they're. One of the criticisms I got from the left, which didn't even make sense, the person hadn't even seen this, was like, oh, it's just like athletes and business leaders. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I actually think one of the things that's interesting is like, you have business leaders, but you have labor leaders. Those people hated each other, laughing at both Jewish, you know what I mean? And so like, that, it's like 2 Jews, 3 opinions or whatever, but I also think it's really important to push back on some of those stereotypes, and also to see the incoherence of some of those stereotypes. Like how many times have I spend too much time thinking about this probably, but you hear like, oh Jews, communists, oh Jews, evil capitalists. I'm like, which one is it? Probably there's some of both in every group. So I think that in terms of that concern about the victimization, this is actually a really great resource. But unfortunately, like, teaching about these topics, even that are one of my goals with this curriculum is to bring the temperature down. That like it shouldn't be controversial to say, to talk about Jews. Yeah, when I was doing this, actually, when I was on a set recently, I was wearing a chai, this sign of life here, which just means life, and one of the producers was like, oh, that's like an Israel thing, you should take that off. I'm like, not really, but yeah. So, and like the idea that that's a controversial thing, and this stuff is super far right now, so I do understand being nervous, but I also, like, we gotta teach the true history of things, right? Yeah.
Just to kind of piggyback off that, what I'm seeing, I'm looking at hold of the resources.
Oh.
I don't know if I got the right spot, it was a little difficult to find.
Did you Google Jewish American Hidden Voices?
No, I typed it in exactly as the picture and I had to go to like 4 different sites. to
So it
find
goes to like We Teach NYC, and then you have to like scroll down to the
But
Jewish.
I got all the hidden voices, like all of them.
It has all of them.
Yes, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Just going off of what you said, it's not like insertion of one group. You teach a topic, I teach social studies and ELA.
Yeah.
So when I teach my social studies topics, I will bring something from all different groups, and that's actually a good way to do
Oh,
it.
cool.
Because I can say,
Awesome.
come from this, take someone from this book, let me take someone from that
Yeah.
book, and kind of broaden the understanding of people's contributions.
Because
It's
too
not
often
just
people, I taught from the
victimization.
LGBTQ one, and too often many of us are just waiting for that celebratory month
Yeah.
to
No,
do
I
it.
know.
Right, but then again, here you are, you're not teaching about gay.
Right.
I'm talking like the parents that complain, I'm not talking, that's not how I talk.
No, I know.
But you're talking about a positive contribution in American history, and then, oh, this person was black, this person was white, this person was gay, like, it's just like a normal part, a matter-of-fact thing. That's how you build understanding, you build that.
And you want to build that appreciation for the fact that these kids, when they look, oh, that person did it, I can do it too.
Yes, and
That's what you
also,
want to
one of
bring.
the there are real drawbacks to like building things around individuals, but what it does make it easier to kind of like slot things in.
Right.
But I think one of the positive parts are the human stories here. So like each person is not just focused on like, oh, like, you know, Jewish like entrepreneur, Jewish legislator or whatever. And so you do kind of see them as full people, which I think is especially helpful with young people who are so taken, we all are taken with narrative, you know, so hopefully that makes it a little more complicated of who these folks are, and it's not just slapping a name on them. But yeah, indeed, I don't mean to diminish the challenges that one faces with any group, and especially now when like it feels like you could say anything and be, I feel this too, and be recorded, and not just about this topic. You could say something, you could be recorded, you could be reported, and like, you know, and that's really hard. And there are versions of that across the political spectrum too. Someone had their hand up. Yes.
Yeah, well, I understand what the question is, the educator here is saying, like, you know, what's too much, and is it just my own identity that I'm trying to teach? But I think part of maybe in today's society, it's okay because we're trying to marginalize so many different groups to say, hey, did you know Milk was gay? And
Harvey Milk.
and-
In volume 2. Yeah, go
and, you know,
ahead.
you need to know. And did you know that Salk invented the polio vaccine? Did you know he was Jewish? You know, many lives he saved. And you go down the list with Nobel Prize winners, how many are Jews, and more Jews, that don't marginalize our group because look at what we've given back to society. I think there's a way we could say, you know, stop, take the gas pedal off us because we've really helped society.
Yes, I mean, I'm all for what you're saying. I do think if you're teaching in a secular environment, the idea that you're teaching this because it's part of your community, you got to feel out your public, because that could be read as really wrong. So like, for example, like I mentioned, I don't teach a class on Jewish history. I teach a million different US history classes. One thing I started doing, and I should have done a long time ago when I realized how much ignorance and even antipathy there was toward Jews, is like this book Zoe mentioned, This History of American Workout Culture. I teach a big lecture class called The History of like Fitness in America, and it's all about how we became obsessed with our bodies and everything. And like, I had some Jewish figures in there, but I had never really talked about them as Jews, which like, shame on me, I'm the problem here, like it's the problem, it's me, right? And so I started just kind of in this class that had nothing to do with Jewish history, just emphasizing those identities, emphasizing why. For example, remember Lucille Roberts, those like women's only gyms? Okay, Lucille Roberts was a Jewish woman who graduated from Penn, who like could only get a job basically working at this, in sales at this department store. She got sick of men bossing her around, and so she decided like health is wellness is something just for rich people. I want to make a place for the secretaries and the wives of police officers and teachers to go work out. And it's this like incredible story of this Jewish woman entrepreneur. Not in volume 2, sorry, but she, anyway, so when I was talking about her in the course, I talked about her being Jewish, how like the department store trade, etc. And it just, I like to think those like small contributions are less like, now I want to say a word for my people, which I think might rightly be taken the wrong way. You know what I mean? And I will say, I don't hide much, as you can probably tell from my personality, but I'll say like, well, I'm Jewish, or as a woman, but I throw that stuff in all the time. So a lot of that is about how, as a mom, you know, whatever. So I think like it really depends on your public too. But I would counsel against this being like your own, like this is for me and my people. No, this is U.S. history, people. That's what I'm here to teach you. Like, you know, no, it's not a special interest kind of thing, I think. I don't
Just
know.
a side note, though, but if you really want a little short subject, you can do greatest Jewish sports figures. It won't take you too long.
But thank you for that. Sorry, did you have a question?
So in Georgia Tech,
Yeah.
how do you teach this? Is this like with Strauss, do you say this is part of the American history in that period, in that course?
Strauss would be an example if you're sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, I was going to say in the Union General is that you're teaching the Civil War. So you're inserting these things?
Yeah, she's got
Western
it, yeah.
expansion, I teach like, Manifest Destiny, all that, why they go west, the gold rush, things like that. And then you could talk about, let's spotlight that, everybody knows jeans, who loves jeans, who wears their jeans.
Right.
Let's talk about, let's focus on this is where it comes from.
Right, when jeans were a new device. So I would say westward expansion, exactly right. Immigration, as a German immigrant, exactly right.
Even throw it in a little bit, showing, look at the time difference between
Yes,
when
and then
jeans were
bring it up,
made
like, women
and.
didn't get their own hair until.
Exactly, women didn't get doctors much later. So there are a lot, you're all creative people. This is meant to be easy, not because you're not capable of coming up with tough stuff yourself, but it's meant to be easy enough that it feels like easy to use. Then you take it in the direction that your students want and what you like to teach about. Like this is the beginning. I feel like there's always a balance with curriculum, like you want it to be accessible and easy, but not like insipid and like, oh, you have to use it this way. So there's a lot of flexibility with it too. But yeah, that's how I use Levi Strauss. Okay, I should stop talking now. Okay.
Okay.
No. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Petrozello, that was amazing. I promised you would be a great speaker. You are, you're a wonderful speaker. And it's, really refreshing to hear what is like a very honest and personal perspective on the hard intellectual work of putting together something like this, doing the scholarship, but also doing the work with the community, and in this case, the Board of Education. I can only imagine the different meetings that you attended. So thank you. It looks like a great resource, and I know that we're all happy to have it. I would like to end our talking portion of the event so that you have 20 minutes to grab a cup of coffee or tea. There's some desserts back there, and you can chat with Natalia, you can chat with Dave, you can chat with me, and have a chance to look at the artwork more closely and check it out. So I will just say thank you. Thanks again, Brianna and the New Jersey Commission for Holocaust Education. And thank you, like multiple people have said, thank you to each and every one of you who joined us here today. We really are delighted to have you. You are doing the hard work and we appreciate you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.